Using small boats to visit the islands off the west coast of Scotland requires a lot of foreplanning, and I constantly have to adjust the plans as I go. Flexibility is crucial to my success. I always have a plan A and a plan B, and although I visit the same islands many times, each and every visit is different, mainly due to sea conditions and weather at the time. In this adventure I had to resort to my plan C, which is head for any safe port in a storm and sit it out until the weather improves. I had to wait an extra 4 days during this adventure for weather conditions to allow me to get home safely again. Not that it bothered me, as I'm used to doing such things like this and treat it as all part of my adventure. It started at the end of April when the weather forecasters mentioned we were in for a heat wave, possibly the warmest days in April for the past 10 years. I checked winds and they were forecast as light winds for a full week, at least, except for the third day when they could gust to 25 miles per hour before returning light for the rest of the week. I certainly wasn't going to stay at home with a forecast like that. My plan for the week was to launch from my home port in Loch Tarbert, then head south past Oban and onto the island of Easdale, where I would land and tell some friends what my plans were, as I intended staying overnight with them in a few days' time. And leaving Easdale, I then headed for Eilean Mor, one of the McCormick Isles, where I would camp up for the night. The following day I would head for the island of Gigha, where I had arranged to meet some kayaking friends the following day and spend a few days in their company, before heading back to Easdale. This plan didn't happen due to unforeseen weather, and after visiting Gigha, I headed for the shelter of Loch Tarbert in the island of Jura, where I was stormbound for 4 days before I could get home again. Tuesday, 29th of April 2025, and I launched in the early morning tide. It was as forecast, a lovely sunny, windless morning. I then parked the car and trailer at my house before setting off on the latest adventure. Loch Tarbert was a mill pond as I happily skimmed its surface, doing around 15 miles per hour, towards the Connell Bridge and the Falls of Laura. The falls were flat in the still flooding tide, and soon I was passing Connell, did Staffnage and heading out into the Firth of Lorne. Even the sea was flat calm in this perfect morning, so I decided to head into Oban Bay and down the Sound of Carrera. Nearing Easdale, a breeze started to stir the sea, as I took a wander over to Inch Island to see what remains of the home of its previous owner, David Brearley. David was a bit of a recluse from northern England who bought the island in 1973. Initially, he built a shed in the centre of the island to live in, before building his more permanent home in a cave at the northern end of the island. He was not keen on visitors landing there, preferring to live his life in solitude. Before he died in 2003, he left his beloved island to the National Trust for Scotland, who unfortunately betrayed his wish that they looked after it, as he sold it on to a private company. Fortunately, it's remained unchanged ever since. These clips show his cave house and a shed and his water tank. I guess every island has a story to tell, and this is Inch Island's tale. Having satisfied my curiosity that his old home, which is now his memorial as far as I'm concerned, still survives the winter gales, I headed over to Easdale Island to tell my friend my plans. In a few days' time it was annual Easdale Rib Rendezvous, and this year over 100 boats had shown interest in the event. I made arrangements with my friend that I would return on the Saturday evening to socialise with the visiting crews to the island. I then headed off on my adventure again, still heading south, before going through the Cuan Sound and down the Shuna Sound, and heading along the Knapdale Peninsula, before reaching my destination for the day, Eilean Mor, an island off the mouth of Loch Sween. The blue sky had now turned a little grey, but it was still such a perfect day. The last time I came this way it was in September last year, and it was a rather bumpy ride. After this smooth journey, Eilean Mor now filled the horizon, and I was looking forward to spending the night in its sheltered natural harbour and seeing familiar sights again. The island is now under the care of the Eilean Mor Trust, and although there were no other boats in the harbour, I could see the Scottish Saltire flag and wondered if anyone was at home in Billy's house. The stone house is the island's visitor centre and gives a little bit of the history of the island. I was surprised to see it empty, as there was signs that someone was around. I noticed a lovely new display in its walls, which tell the story of the history, so someone was clearly spending time doing the place up. Stepping outside again, I was then welcomed by not only the local lambs, but also by Bill, one of the caretakers. We had a good natter, then I took my leave of his company to get some video clips for my historical lesson of the island. Before I set off, Bill kindly suggested we have a wee dram when I came back, and I thought that was a great idea, so my tour of the island is rather short this time around, as I was feeling rather thirsty. Eilean Mor was once home to St Cormac, who spent his time praying and meditating in a little cave on the south end of the island, possibly around 700 AD. In the 13th century, a chapel was constructed in the island in his memory. A large Celtic cross stands in the highest point of the island. It is a replica of the original cross erected here around the 14th century. The cross beside the chapel is original and from the 10th century. It's believed to be St Cormac's headstone. It's a wonderful, peaceful place to visit, and I paused to soak in the views across to Jura and the mainland. I also enjoyed watching the island's inhabitants. I saw 2 feral goats and asked Bill if they were introducing them to the island, as I had not seen them on any past visits. He admitted he had no idea how they got there, so we both assume they can swim from island to island. My tour of the island over, it was then time to get down to business with Bill, and I confess it was a hard struggle trying to tidy up several tins of brewdog and a full bottle of yellow nectar. Eventually the sunset stopped play and we retired to our beds. Bill, if you watch this, and I'm sure you will, my thanks go to you for hosting such a wonderful evening, and also to the island's trustees who do a fantastic job keeping the island in such good conditions. A warm welcome you all extend to visitors. In my memory, the island is now St. Bill's Island. I only hope to get the history correct, as I found it hard to concentrate as I quenched my thirst. I confess, I'm not sure if I slept well or passed out that night, when I woke to another lovely morning. The sun was up, just, as I'm an early riser and I was keen to clear my head as soon as possible, and then get underway again. I enjoyed a bowl of cereal sitting in the boat, but I decided to sit on the pier to cook my coffee, as a hot stove and around 100 litres of petrol in a small boat could prove more volatile than the whisky I consumed the previous night. I heard Bill snoring loudly from the visitor centre as I sucked my coffee, so I can only apologise to him for not saying goodbye, but I'm sure we'll meet again. And then I was off to sea again, turning south and heading for the island of Gigha. It was that calm sea I kept the side panel of my canvas cabin open to assist air the inside and clear the condensation from sleeping in it during the night. The cool sea air also assisted drying out my soggy brain, and that's when I started to think about meeting the kayakers the following day. I checked my phone and saw a text from them. It read that they had decided to cancel their meeting due to the poor forecast. I was a bit confused as the sea could not have been calmer, but I could not get a phone signal to check the forecast in case I was mistaken, and it was actually windy. Then I forgot all about kayaks and winds, as I was heading for Gigha anyway and thoroughly enjoying myself. I paused when I saw what looked like a fish lying half dead on the surface, then realised it was a little porpoise. Generally, porpoise are very shy and quickly dive. However, I have now seen 3 floating on the surface, and hardly moving. I did shallow dive before resurfacing and breathing in the air. I'm not sure if porpoises sleep in the water or are ill. If anyone knows if this behaviour is normal, post a text below. I hope there's not a new disease for porpoise like avian flu for birds, because as I say, this is the third I've seen recently. Approaching Gigha, I had a difficult decision to make. Would I make the island before the Isle of Ferry passed by, or would it run me down? I played safe and waited for it to pass, then made my way to the lovely sandy bay in God's green isle called Gigha. I surfed ashore in the ferry's large wake. The tide was now falling, so I anchored offshore to keep the boat afloat, as I went to admire a lovely banking of wild flowers, which proves that spring had truly sprung. I brought my sleeping bags ashore to air them and ensure all traces of the night's condensation had dried out. Then I aired my stuffy nose with the lovely aroma of wild flowers. It was such a lovely morning. Then it was time for a short walk, and after that, it was coffee time. As I sat warming myself in the sun, the drone had a good nosy around. For info only, the beach I'm on is Bagnadorlin, on the northern tip of Gigha, and I believe it was our late Queen Elizabeth's favourite beach in the UK. When passing in the Royal Yacht Britannica, she always asked to be brought ashore here, so she could have a wander around. I tend to agree with her in that it's a very special place. Once I'd seen enough, and with my head now clear of all remnants of whisky and brewdog mix, I headed off for around Gigha, going in a clockwise direction. I didn't hang around at Minish Bay, as I was aware the mainland ferry was heading for its slipway, and again I like to keep well clear of commercial vessels. I did admire the many little sandy coves around the island coast, and can happily say I've landed in them all in past visits. I was now looking forward to a slow wander through the Gigha Skerries. I recall in the past having to turn back when the water got too shallow, but this time I get through, possibly because of neap tides. Passing Gigha Island, I could now see Cara Island looming straight ahead. It was my next planned stopping point. Unfortunately, I made a terrible error here, which caused me to get stranded in Loch Tarbert for 4 days, and a damaged prop to boot. So what did I do, you may well ask? Well, I upset the brownie of Cara. The brownie is the spirit of a gentleman who was brutally murdered by his companion in the only house of Cara. Legend tells that anyone landing in Cara who doesn't take his hat off and pay homage to him will suffer with consequences. I clean forgot and showed him great disrespect by keeping my hat on, playing with his toys, then flying my drone over his home. And although I remembered eventually it was too late, I had to pay his price. When the drone returned, I heard my phone ping, indicating a text had arrived. It was from the kayakers who asked, had I seen the weather forecast yet? I checked as I now had a signal. Strong winds arriving this evening and lasting 5 days. Saturday being the crux with gusts above 35 miles per hour. I had to decide what to do. I didn't want stuck in Cara at the mercy of the brownie I had insulted, so I decided the best place to get stormbound in this area was Loch Tarbert and Jura. So I jumped in the boat and headed off round the Mull of Cara. I crossed 13 miles of open sea to reach the Sound of Islay, as fast as my wee boat could go. In part 2 of this adventure I've become stormbound, so hope you come back to watch it when it's ready. Thanks for watching.